On this episode of WTF, we are demonstrating how to make a delicious keto quiche. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we help you transform food in your kitchen. I'm Janie.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we are going to walk you step by step through how do you make a keto quiche. And this is going to be based on an improvement of our original pie crust recipe that we developed for the lemon meringue pie. And you can check that out in the description below. But we wanted to start doing more and more these kind of keto crust recipes. And when Hannah, I just called her Canna. So when Hannah started working with the dough, the first piece of feedback that I got from her was she said, I wish this was more rollable and it came out easier. So that was something that we've been working on over the past few weeks. Hannah, what did you really find helped to make this dough more rollable and easier to work with?
Of course. So going off of the previous pie dough that we already have up on the blog, the one featured in the lemon meringue pie, as you mentioned, it had 10 grams of the transglutaminase in it to start with, as well as 1 egg providing the protein that it needed to work and bond those proteins together. But I was still having a hard time rolling it out. I was kind of Frankensteining this pie dough into the pan to give me a pie crust, but I wanted something traditional that you could do with a regular pie dough that had gluten in it. So what I did was I increased the transglutaminase by 2, so 20 grams in total, as well as adding 2 extra egg whites as well as a whole egg to really bump up that protein content and give me enough protein to create the bonds within the dough that really lets you roll it out and have the feeling like you're working with a real traditional pie dough, but this one's keto. So.
Yeah, and the reason why that works is we talked last week about the role of meat glue in bonding things together and how meat glue requires lysine and glutamine, both of which are very abundant in eggs in order to bind. So by increasing both the TG content and the egg content, you're able to get that stretchiness. And I think a lot of times people try to get it from things like xanthan and other gelling agents. But I personally think that TG is a better ingredient for it because it's forming a permanent bond and it's not just gelling, which is a much stronger, ends up giving you a lot more elasticity. All right, I want to jump right into this demo because I kind of want to walk us step by step through how do you create the dough, how do you make the quiche. We're going to reset the table a couple times, So let's get started with the dry ingredients and what is going into the dough itself.
Yeah. So this is a super simple recipe overall. We are going to be starting off with our almond flour. And these are both keto-friendly flour alternatives, and we have our coconut flour as well.
All the ratios will be links in the description below, so don't worry about how much there is. Just click on that link, it'll give you the whole recipe.
Yep, and then we just have a little bit of salt and our transglutaminase as well. Put that all in. And I'm just going to go ahead and give this a few pulses, make sure everything's all combined.
And you'll notice that we're doing this inside of a blender, a food processor, and we're not using a mixer. And the reason for that is because there's no real gluten to be developed, which you would get from a mixer. And I know, Hannah, you did try to do it in a mixer. How did that go for you?
It didn't go so well. The butter was not incorporating at all. It was leaving me with large chunks, and I really like the way that the blade disperses the butter, breaks it up, makes it a more even dough overall. I will say this dough is a little bit wetter than your typical pie dough, but it turns out just fine. I would recommend leaving it overnight, at least the longer you can leave it, the better. The more bonds are going to be made within the dough. It's going to be stronger, easier to roll out, easy to transfer.
Yep, so definitely use a food processor for this one. All right, well, what's next?
So we are going to go ahead and add our egg. This is 1 egg and 2 egg whites in here. kind of see everything coming together now, and we are just going to go in and add our cubed cold butter. All right. And it's as easy as that. So you're going to want to take the mixture out of the food processor and just transfer it right onto a thing of plastic wrap.
Okay.
And we're going to wrap it up. So now we're just going to scrape out the dough from inside of our food processor and place it right on the plastic wrap.
Okay, and the reason why we want this to rest for 24 hours is because of the time that the TG or meat glue takes in order to properly form the bonds. And a lot of times people want to shortcut that process. And if you watched the meat glue episode last week, we talked about how you can, use sous vide to activate that sooner, but obviously you don't want to be doing that with your dough. So definitely resting is the best way to go in order to get the proper bond. If you just rest it for 2 hours, it's not going to roll out correctly.
Exactly. So we're just going to shape this into a disc. So it's a little bit easier for us when we go to roll it out later. And there you have your pie dough ready to be chilled.
Cool. All right, and then we have one, of course, that we pre-chilled in order to demonstrate to you on camera how easy it is to roll this one out. So we're just going to swap those out and start showing you the rolling process. Then we're going to part bake it, then we're going to fill it, and of course we're going to taste it.
Yes. Okay, so this pie dough has been chilling for about 24 hours now, so it should be all good and ready to roll. And I just have a little bit of coconut flour here just to sprinkle on top. Make sure we're not going to get any dough sticking. Actually, just a little bit underneath as well.
Yep. And while we were trying to improve this recipe, we did try a few different things that we found, in different people's recipes for dough. I think we tried adding psyllium husks, we tried adding rice flour, a bunch of different things, and we ended up kind of sticking with the mostly coconut flour because it ended up just tasting the best. It had like the best mouthfeel and the best texture and flavor out of all the doughs. If you do happen to like any of those ingredients and you want to start playing around with this recipe, I would recommend, you're certainly welcome to do so. I would recommend keeping that TG ratio at the same as in our recipe, as well as, if necessary, changing around the protein content, because that is really, at the end of the day, what's holding that dough together. Everything else is just flavor and texture. And I love how that's rolling out right now. It's really, really beautiful.
Okay, get a good workout in while we're rolling our crusts out. Okay. So once it's rolled to, it's a little, we might have to work it a little bit, but it's helpful just to kind of scrape it from underneath, give it the best advantage of lifting off.
And I will say, if you're doing this and you're like, oh no, for some reason your dough did break, it's not the end of the world. You can still piece it together in the pie. I don't think it's like a complete waste. It still comes out very delicious once everything is baked.
All right. So, I do find that the easiest way to do this is to take it and kind of just flop it into the pan. I wouldn't recommend, as you've seen sometimes people do with traditional pie doughs, is wrap the dough around the rolling pin and go in. That would be beautiful. This dough, it's not going to work like that, so I wouldn't recommend that. That didn't work so well.
It's okay. Honestly, that's part of Hannah's learning, that on WTF, because we're doing everything live, sometimes it doesn't work out entirely the way we plan it, and that's okay. But she has done this pie probably like 10, 15, 20 times at this point, so it definitely works. It's always when you're doing it on camera that it doesn't work out quite the way you want it to.
So, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and fix the edges a little bit, but as you can see, most of the dough goes right in. Okay, so I might want to do a little like
and the
smoothing.
texture on this dough, so I just grabbed a little piece that I think is left over, and it's very like, it definitely feels doughy. Like I think a lot of times the keto doughs, they feel crumbly and they feel kind of dry.
Yeah.
And this one doesn't have that at all. It has like a really beautiful, like kneadability that I think is really awesome for making any type of pie. So yeah, it feels nice.
Yeah, it does have a very pie dough texture, which I think is great. Yeah, and a lot of the recipes that I found online are pressing the pie dough in, kind of like you would with a tart shell. So I think this is great to really get that authenticity.
Yeah, and it tastes amazing too. So I'm very excited to kind of cut into this one. So after Hannah's done, prettying up the pie dough, we're gonna pop it in the oven. We're going to part bake it for about 10 minutes?
Yep.
Okay, for about 10 minutes at 350.
Yep.
See, I don't always have the numbers memorized. And then we'll be right back to kind of show you the finished par baked dough, and then we're going to fill it.
So as you can see, we have our pie dough that has been par baked. In a quiche, you really do want to par bake the crust so that the egg mixture isn't leaking through the pie dough. You want that nice solid bottom of the dough, of course. So this was in the oven for 10 minutes, like we said. Just that nice golden brown crust around the edges is what we're really looking for. And as you can see, I went ahead and poked some holes in the bottom of the pie crust with a fork. This just lets air come up, allows the bottom to get cooled, and also no rising to occur. But since this doesn't have gluten in it, that isn't gonna really happen. But if you don't want to poke holes in your crust, you could also use pie weights. You could also use raw beans, things like that to weigh down, or you can even use sugar, just putting a thing of parchment paper down, of course, before you fill your pie crust with anything like that. But we have our quiche mixture over here that is ready to go. The fun thing about quiche is you really can add any ingredients you want into it. Since this is a keto quiche recipe, we are really sticking to the proteins and the fats here, but of course if you wanted to add any vegetables, any seasonings, any other meats, any other cheeses, you can absolutely do that. So we just have a cheddar and bacon quiche here, pretty simple, nothing too fancy, and we're really just gonna go ahead and fill the pie crust up with this mixture, making sure to spread around all the bacon and the cheese, all the good stuff. Giving that a little movement. And then we are going to put this back into the oven at 350 for about 45 to 50 minutes until you see that nice browning again on the top like this. And if you aren't sure if it's done or not, you can always go ahead and stick a toothpick in it. If it's clean, it's done. So we're going to go ahead and put this in the oven.
Awesome. All right, and now we're at my favorite part, of course, the tasting. So we have this one that we already finished baking, so we're going to cut into it, show you that beautiful crust, and of course see how delicious it is. All right, Hannah, do the honors. So I really love that slice. A little bit of this crust came off, as it sometimes does, and you can kind of see it's very flaky, it's short. It tastes super good. I think when you're just tasting the crust by itself, you get a little bit of that coconut flavor.
Yeah.
Well, that's to be expected, but let's see how does it do when we taste it with the rest of the quiche. That's so good. It's cold, but it's still so good.
Yeah. Well, you can eat quiche cold or hot, really.
That's true. I actually like it cold. So this is such a tasty recipe. I love the slight improvement that we made on the previous dough just to make it a little stretchier so you can roll it out. Let us know what types of pies you're looking forward to making. And until next week, from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie.
And I'm Hannah.